Flaw questions are one of the most common types on the LSAT logical reasoning section, and learning how to handle them accurately and efficiently can make a huge difference in your score. Today, I'll break them down for you, but first, for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, what are flaw questions asking you to do? They are testing your ability to evaluate arguments critically and accurately. Today, I'll cover how to identify a flaw question, steps to approach them systematically, common reasoning patterns and how to spot them, and how to avoid traps that lead you to choose incorrect answers. By the end of this video, you'll be ready to tackle these questions with a clear strategy. First, step 1, how do you spot flaw questions? The good news is flaw questions are pretty easy to recognize if you know what to look for. They include phrases like, which one of the following describes a flaw in the reasoning, or the argument is most vulnerable to criticism because, or a questionable technique used in the argument is. When you see language like this, you know the question is asking you to identify a flaw in the argument's reasoning. Step 2, understand the logic of flaw questions. Flaw questions are a type of question that asks you to evaluate assumptions or gaps contained in an argument. Similar questions include sufficient assumption, necessary assumption, strengthen, or weaken. All these questions hinge on one central idea, that the conclusion does not follow logically from the evidence. Your job here is to simply find and articulate the gap in the reasoning. Once you spot the gap, you'll be able to anticipate or predict the correct answer. Step 3, let's look at some common reasoning structures that show up frequently in flaw questions on the logical reasoning section. First, we have comparison, an argument that inappropriately compares two things because they are not considering all relevant factors. Secondly, we have causation, an argument that assumes that because two things are correlated, one must have therefore caused the other. And finally, we have conditional logic, where the argument is confusing necessary and sufficient conditions. If you are able to identify these argumentative structures, you'll be able to more easily hone in on what the flaw is. Step 4, of course, we want you to avoid common trap answers. LSAT is masterful at crafting tempting but incorrect answers. First off, you want to look for choices that describe the wrong flaw. In other words, the answer choice is accusing the argument of a crime that it had not committed. Of course, this would have been a valid flaw had the argument committed that flaw, but that does not happen to be the flaw present in the argument. Secondly, a wrong answer might be out of scope, introducing irrelevant information, kind of like it's a non sequitur that has nothing to do with the argument presented. Third, a wrong answer might be too strong or too weak. It might misstate the assumption in some way, or fail to adequately describe the problem with the argument. So it's a matter of degree, perhaps. Fourth, the choice might describe something that is not actually a flaw. It might be something that is technically true about the argument, but not anything problematic about the argument. And so these are some examples of trap answers you want to knock out. The more of them you can knock out, the closer you'll be to finding and choosing the correct answer. So here is an example of a comparative reasoning flaw. Quote, we should avoid eating at fast food chains because they are more expensive than home-cooked meals. The flaw here is an incomplete comparison. The argument here is assuming that cost is the only factor worth considering, but it's ignoring other relevant reasons that people might want to eat out at a fast food chain, such as maybe it's more convenient or you'd save a lot of time by eating out rather than having to cook a meal at home. The correct answer would address this flaw or gap in the argument, pointing out that cost is only one of several relevant factors worth considering when deciding where to eat or whether to eat out versus eating a home-cooked meal. Trap answer choices here might describe unrelated problems, such as questioning the nutritional value of fast food or claiming the comparison is about quality of food rather than the cost of food. Here is another example based on a causal flaw that relates to correlation causation flaws or correlation causation reasoning. Quote, students who participate in extracurricular activities tend to perform better academically. Therefore, joining a club will improve your grades. The flaw here is mistaking correlation for causation. The argument here is assuming that participating in activities directly causes better grades without considering other factors like motivation or time management skills. The correct answer is going to highlight this assumption, but a trap answer might describe issues like the sample size or avoid addressing the causation issue here directly. So here are some key takeaways for you about LSAT logical reasoning flaw questions. Again, first, you can ID them with keywords like flaw in the reasoning, surprise, surprise, or vulnerable to criticism. Secondly, evaluate the argument's conclusion as related to the evidence and look for gaps in the logic. Third, look for reasoning patterns like comparison, correlation, causation, or conditional logic. And fourth, avoid trap answers that are irrelevant, too strong, or do not adequately describe the flaw. Now, again, it's incredibly important to master flaw questions because they are one of the most common types of questions on the LSAT logical reasoning section. And so if you're struggling with them or anything else on the LSAT for that matter, there are a wide variety of ways that I and my team at LSAT Unplugged can support you on your journey to scoring a 170 or above. If you're interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.